Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, 5 Insights on FSMA Rules and Implementation. My name is Holly Cardozo. I'm a Marketing Manager with SAI Global, and I'm pleased to welcome you today. Before we begin, I'll just speak to a few housekeeping slides. So firstly, if you can hear us but you cannot see us, the presentation, I invite you to refer back to your registration link. This will get you to both seeing and hearing the presentation. Excuse me. The other way you may interact with us, there's two actually ways that you may interact with us today. One is through the question and answer box. Should you have a question through the presentation, I encourage you to click on that box, type in your question as you think of them, then you can collapse this, this panel, the GoToWebinar panel, off to the right of your screen by clicking on the 3 small arrows. And you may reopen that box by doing the same thing. And the other way you may interact with us is through our quick poll questions. We have 2 poll questions today, so I'll speak to these as we meet the questions, and you can select your answer, and we'll share the results with the group. Our presenter today is Dr. Bob Strong. He's a senior consultant and food safety expert with SAI Global. He's a driving force behind our food safety operations in the areas of GMP, supplier assurance programs, namely GFSI recognized schemes, of course including SQF-BRC and FSSC 22000. He's loads of experience in the food industry, working for all shapes and sizes of organizations, and he's one of our primary trainers in the field as well. So I'm very pleased to welcome you, Dr. Bob. I'm going to kick over the presentation to your screen, and I'll let you speak.
All right. Well, good morning to everybody, at the afternoon for some of you. And so let me flip over to my screen, and let me, again, make sure that you're with me. I want to thank you for giving a part of your Friday afternoon to listen to this. But first, obviously, concern for you is, are you confused by all that's happening with FSMA? Certainly from the people that I'm talking to at training classes and listening to when I go to food safety meetings, that is one of the primary problems that they're having right now. The other thing is they're anxious because in most cases you, I would assume, are the one that your company's relying on to get them where they need to be by the date they need to be, and it's a lot of weight on you, especially as you maybe don't totally understand what you need to do to be there. And so it becomes overwhelming, and it is, because there's so many things happening at the same time, all going to be coming on you in the next year, 2 years, and if you're lucky, 3 years, but some of them are here with us today, and that's what we're going to talk about. We're also going to be talking about how we could be available to you to help you get where you need to be. So we are going to talk about 5 insights on FSMA rules implementation, talk about how you can learn more about these FSMA rules, give you a few tips about how to comply, give you some tips on what I'm hearing where people are having some issues currently already with the FDA, and talk a little about best practices. Then obviously I'm going to be generic because I can't be specific to you because I'm not sure what industries you all represent right now. So what is happening, and what is happening to the FDA, and how are they going to react to us differently now? Well, remember that Congress charged them with changing their focus from being reactive to being preventive. So the FDA is coming into you now to see what are you doing to prevent having problems, not coming in to see what are you doing about problems. They're going to do that still in their reactive mode, but they're coming in now to see what programs you've got, what training you've done, where's your records, what type of environmental swabbing you're doing, etc., etc. So it is a different FDA. They have increased authority because remember now that they can come in and talk to your employees. They can come in and look at all your programs. They can come in and take copies of your programs and take them away with them. They can come in and look at your records and take copies of them and take them away with you. And be concerned if they start doing that, because they're not taking them away to fill filing cabinets. They're taking them away because they found some issues with them, or they're taking them away to send to their technical experts to see if your food safety plan is actually robust enough to do what it needs to do. Another function that they got when President Obama signed FSMA into law on January the 4th, 2011, so we are talking over 6 years ago now that this has been coming, they have the right to do mandatory recalls. And so if you don't recall your product when they tell you, they will do it for you. Then they'll find your top executive in your facility, and they'll find your company. Then they'll do the recall, and then they'll charge you for that. So it's a no win-win situation. So obviously you do a recall if they say so. They're increasing the strength on food import because, again, not all of our problems happen with domestic products. They happen with international products. So now you've got to make sure your suppliers, if they're coming from outside the country, are meeting the preventive controls for human foods or animal foods, or they're meeting the produce guidelines, and you have no choice. You have to make sure they're doing that. So you've got to look at all their food safety plans, get a whole lot of records from your suppliers, and your suppliers are all around the world. The inspectors, going back to 2, the inspectors now are called investigators. And now they come in and they are actually more product knowledgeable because they've reassigned their investigators based on product knowledge, whereas before they were regional. So therefore, if they were based in LA, they would have a region, which meant quite often they got home every night. Now, product knowledge means they may be going into Arizona, going up into Oregon. They may be going further than that. Some of these investigators are not very happy with that because they didn't sign on for all this travel they're now getting. But that's what they're doing. They are getting into now doing it based on product knowledge. So if you thought before that the FDA person didn't quite know enough about your product line, that's changing. They're also forming partnerships with other groups. I was reading this morning something about Wisconsin's now going to accept FDA inspections of their plants and won't go in and do a state inspection anymore. We've got the fact that the FDA is willing to delegate to states, and maybe the FDA won't go in. And so we're getting that. We know that they're talking to each other about EPA things, OSHA things, and all that. They've been doing that for a while. So they are forming relationships. The one thing that hasn't happened, and we would love it to have happened, is that they would recognize a GFSI audit and tend to leave you alone. CFIA is doing that in Canada, but there is no plans right now for the FDA to do that. But GFSI and FDA are working to try to make that true in the near future, and that hopefully will back the FDA off because they'll feel you've got all of the I's dotted and the T's crossed, and they'll rely on a GFSI audit done by a qualified auditor. So remember, the auditor has to be qualified as well. So one of the big things that are happening to us now, and then we're going to talk about some of these dates, and obviously these dates are going to vary depending on who you are, who your supplier is, and therefore the dates we're going to give you in a minute are as current as we know them, but you're going to have to verify them themselves. So what's coming down the road right now? And when I say coming down the road, you find some of these have already passed these dates if you're a large company. Mitigation strategy to protect food against intentional adulteration. That way it's actually wrong. I didn't spot that. It's intentional adulteration. What is that? It's actually a fancy word for food defense. So you have to have a food defense plan, a very detailed food defense plan, a food defense plan that the FDA will look at with records and corrective actions and root causes, etc., and training. Wow. So it's not just the food defense plan you always had that the third-party auditor looked at. Now it's one that's a little like on steroids, and you're going to have the FDA look at it. We got the sanitary transportation of human food, human or animal food right now. And the dates are coming up. We're going to see they're actually coming up this month. We got the produce safety guidelines. So if you're buying produce, there's lots of guidelines for the farmer. And remember, it doesn't matter if the farmer's in Mexico or they're in Thailand. If they're supplying to America, they've got to meet the FDA regulations. The big one for us right now is obviously the foreign supplier verification programs, because big companies need to be there this month. And we're going to show you the dates in a minute. So you may not be importing anything. That's fine. You may not be importing anything where you want to be the FSBP importer. That's fine. But sometimes you may become the FSBP importer by default, because if you're bringing something into America and you already have a purchase order or you've already purchased it, it defaults to you being the one that's going to do that unless you can get somebody else to do it for you. And therefore you have to say who is that somebody else and get that in writing. The FDA is working on accredited third-party certification. There's nothing you and I can do about that. They're going to get there, but we don't know when they're going to get there. And they're going to accredit people to come in and audit you on behalf of the FDA. And they say they're going to use that just for foreign countries, and I believe that's going to be true to start with. But where are they going to get these auditors from, and are they going to go into your suppliers, and are they going to do a good job in China and Thailand, Japan, wherever? The big one, obviously, is the preventive controls for human foods or animal food, depending on what you're into. And those right now are starting to go into effect. In fact, we'll see in a minute, for large companies that went into effect last September. So if you're a large company, you're already 8 months behind. The FDA has indicated they're going to give us draft guidance documents. Well, one of the problems happening with draft guidance documents is every time we change a government, we change the president. And this is not a Republican-Democrat statement. This is just a fact. All guidance documents, therefore everything that is just something nice for the government to do but not enacted in law, gets put on hold. And it is on hold. The rest of those guidance documents are on hold right now. And it'll be up to President Trump and the Republican Party to decide sometime to fund them and take them off hold. But as you can see, they're more into right now immigration, tax, and into the Obamacare thing. So they got bigger things right now than worrying about other guidance documents for food safety moving forward. No, they're not. But Trump apparently has indicated he fully supports FSMA, and he's fully behind it, and he's going to make sure that it works. So the guidance documents hopefully will get released and move forward again later this year. So what you have to be asking yourself is, what are the rules? Which of these we just talked about apply to me? Which ones don't? Because if they don't apply to me, I can move on and start concentrating on the ones that do apply to me. And when I say to me, I'm talking about your organization. And then we have to talk a minute about whether you're a big organization, a small organization, and therefore how long you have to meet the deadlines. And that was a real problem, because when this first came out, guidelines were put in. Some of those guidelines are already passed. Thank goodness they revised those guidelines, because you were being asked to meet a guideline, yet your supplier wasn't having to meet that guideline, but your supplier was part of your food safety plan, and if they didn't have to meet it, how could you make them meet it? So the government realized that and said, okay, your deadline is going to be dependent upon your supplier's deadline. And that's why some of these dates got pushed back. When should I start? About 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago. There's no way you should be starting right now. If you are, you're climbing a mountain, and the mountain's pretty steep. And I'm not sure you're going to get to the top in time, and you got to get to the top. So you have to decide, if you're climbing that mountain, can I go up a smaller hill and get to the top of that, and then get onto another hill, get to the top of that, and I can do this mountain in small hills and get there. So where do I start? That is what you have to decide, because if you're not going to add a whole lot of resources, I'm not sure how you're going to get there. What surprised me is I've been teaching the preventive controls for human foods, and I've been teaching the foreign supplier verification program, and I've been teaching the food defense. I've asked people in the class, did you add any people to your staff to handle FSMA? And the answer was no. And I said, you have all those responsibilities on your shoulder in addition to what you were doing before, because I'm assuming your job before was a full-time job. And you're going to do all this now with all the paperwork you're going to do. People are going to read it, got to read these food safety plans for your suppliers. You've got to look at the develop a food safety plan for yourself. You've got to do it for different types of products. You've got to put all these things away in a file cabinet, having read them. You've got to look at all these third-party audits, and I can keep going. And you're going to do that all in addition to what you're already doing. And it isn't a one-time off deal. You're going to be doing this over and over and over again every year, and approving new suppliers, and you're going to have to do all this. So let's look at the dates. Well, you can see preventive controls for human and animal foods, first 2 dates there, they're already gone. They were back last September. You're already 8 months behind. And the FDA gave everybody a grace period of a few months and didn't basically go out until about January. But that's 4 months ago now, almost 5 months ago. So if the FDA hasn't come to see you yet, it's simply because you're considered a little lower risk product, and they haven't had time to get to you, but they could be knocking on the door tomorrow. Produce safety, you've got a little bit longer because they realize the farmer's got to do a whole lot of stuff and he can't get there as quickly as you can, so they backed him off into 18. The Foreign Supplier Verification Program, look at that date. It goes into effect now, May the 30th, 2017. I got people coming to class now who really aren't knowing what that is. They're coming to class to find out, and then walking away and going, man, we got an awful lot to do. And now it's going to be tied in with customs paperwork, and the FDA is going to have access to the customs paperwork, and on there has to be a foreign supplier verification program, person identified, meaning company, and they have to have a DUNS number, and I can't get into total detail on that. There's an awful lot of stuff you got to do, and yet you got just a short while to do it if you're a large business. Hopefully the large businesses are where they need to be, and I'm not talking to large businesses now because they are hopefully where they need to be. When you switch over to the small business column, you can see you do have a little bit more time. You got about another year from last year, but remember now, let's look at preventive control for human foods. You've only got to September the 18th, 2017. Yeah, it's a year longer than last year for a large business, but that date's coming up real quick. We're talking 4 months, and if you haven't got what you need to do, can you get there in 4 months? Small businesses, very small businesses, get a little longer, but they don't usually have all of the capability in their staff to get where they need to be. So the mountain for them looks even steeper. So what we caution you on these dates is don't wait till you get close to the dates. Don't think it's not going to take much to get there. It is. Don't think it's only going to take a couple of months. It isn't. It's going to take 6 months to a year to get there. And the FDA is coming in to see you when these dates go into effect. Now, they could move these dates back again, but I don't think they're in a mindset right now to move them back anymore. Because I think they've moved them back and moved them back and moved them back, and I think now they feel that they're being fair and they're giving you a lot of time. You say a lot of time. They're giving you time to get there. Look at food defense. You got a little bit more time on food defense. Even a large company has to 2019, and then small 2020, and very small 2021. But that isn't that far from now either when you think of all the other things you got to do. And so that's why I'm having people now come to the food defense class, because they need to be sure that they're doing what they need to be doing. So what has been your organization's experience towards FSMA compliance? Difficult. Rules are complex and many. True. Very true. They are complex, and there are many. And so if you haven't read them, you need to read them, because we can give you counsel and advice. We can do these webinars. I can give you our interpretation, but you have to finish up. So I'm going to ask Holly to open up the poll on this.
Sure, thanks, Dr. Bob. So I've opened the poll here, and I invite you to select your response. Just running through the rest of the options. Perhaps you found it challenging, but you're adequately prepared. Perhaps you're in the phase where you're progressing through the implementation plan. So we'll leave it about 10 more seconds or so. That's great. Thanks, everyone. So let me close here, and I'm going to share the results. So not surprising. Most say they're progressing. We're in the place where they would have a plan in place and progressing through, but 22% say challenging, but they feel they're confident, they're prepared. But I guess close to 30% they say they haven't started yet, or that it's very difficult and the rules are complex and many.
Well, the 30% concerns me. It doesn't concern me if you're very small, have very few products, not importing anything, and you're not transporting anything down the road in a tanker or a trailer, because the transportation regulations obviously are going to come into effect. But I feel your pain. I do. I really feel your pain, and I feel that you need help. And now all we're going to talk about is we can offer that help. And there are other places to go get the help as well. So I have to be honest with you, there are other places, but you need to go get the help. The FDA is not going to want you to say when you come in, it was so overwhelming, it was so complex, we didn't understand it, So we waited until you, the FDA, came in, and we thought you may help us, and they're going to come in and say, our role is not to help. We are not allowed by law to consult. We're going to tell you that you're not where you need to be, and we're going to walk away, and we're going to come back. And then when they come back, if you're not where they're going to be, then they're going to debate certain things, like give you a warning letter. They're going to pull your certificate registration and put you out of business. They're going to impound your product because you can't prove it's safe. It's scary. It really is scary. And I'm not trying to minimize, nor am I trying to exaggerate the impact of not being where you need to be. And how are you going to get where you need to be? If your senior leaders in your company do not understand what is coming down the road, the extent of what's coming down the road, the detail of it, and the time it's going to take, and it isn't providing you with adequate resources, and that means people, and that means money, and that means ability to get training, and maybe hiring a consultant, then your top management doesn't understand that the FDA holds them accountable, and they have to sign off on all this. And if it isn't where it needs to be, the FDA is going to come down on your senior person at your facility. And it's in all the regulations that the most senior person is going to be held accountable. Your job may be to, again, tell them that. And if they, again, don't hear that message, they need to be listening to webinars. They need to come to these classes and sit in them. And I am getting some top executives coming to some of the classes. And when they leave, I know they have a total different perspective than when they came in. And they realize that they have to hire people. Because you may have to hire somebody to support your buyers when you find out you've got to buy only from approved suppliers, you've got to have third-party audits, and these people are in Thailand, these people are in Alabama, these people are in Korea, and you've got to get all that stuff. If somebody's got to read it, and you've got to put it on file, and when the FDA comes in, they say, I want to see it, you got to go get it, and you don't want to spend hours trying to find it. And then you're going to give it to the FDA, and the FDA is going to say, I don't like this food safety plan on this company in Korea. Who did the evaluation? And you go, nobody did. And they go, problem, problem, problem. Because you have to do it. And that takes people, and it takes time to do that. So I'm going to tell you, if you're a medium to big company and you haven't hired people to help you, you're not going to get there. For small people, I'm not sure, unless your products are very simple, you're not importing anything, and you don't have a whole lot of different products, how you can get by without hiring people. Because when it comes down to it, if you remember what the FDA said years ago when they were putting this all together, 60% of all the problems caused in the food industry were caused by suppliers to the food industry, not being caused by the supplier making the product. The problem was already in the ingredient, and they had no ability to remove it, so finished up the finished product, and then they were into recall. People were getting sick, and unfortunately, sometimes people were dying, like Peanut Corporation of America. And so what they're saying to you is, you've got to make sure that your supplier is not your problem. And if they are, the FDA doesn't want to hear you say that. Because they're saying to you, we've told you your supplier is going to be a problem. We've told you that you better make sure your supplier is not a problem, and you better get into their food safety plan. You better get into how they run their product. You better dot your I's. You better cross your T's. And we don't want you later to say, they caused me a problem. And the FDA says, you allowed them to cause your problem. Now, when the FDA comes in, they want to see all this supplier approval information. How did you approve a supplier? Where's the documents? Where's the review of their food safety plan? Where's the third-party audit? How easy is it for you to produce those? How easy is it for you to bring them to an FDA person sitting in your office who's been there for the last half hour, and now you're going to go get records, and you're taking an hour or so to find them? You're not going to have a very happy FDA person. So what if you're taking some of the documentation off site, which you're allowed to do, some of it, but you got to produce it in 24 hours. So now you have to decide, do I want the FDA coming back tomorrow because I can't get it to them today? And I think I've told you in the past, you don't want the FDA coming back tomorrow, so you want to try and produce all the records today. So it doesn't say you have to start them all on site, but I would encourage you to do that. Make sure they give you all the information that's necessary. And you say, well, what if I want to buy from a non-approved supplier? Well, let's define an approved supplier. Remember, an approved supplier, it's not only an approved supplier, but it's the plant of that approved supplier. And if that supplier has several plants and you want to approve product from 3 plants from that same supplier, you have to have 3 third-party audits, 1 in each of the facilities. You have to look at all their food safety plans, which hopefully are similar. And you have to make sure that each of the plants is operating in good conditions and is not going to contaminate the product. And then you approve all 3. But that's 3 times the amount of paperwork you need. But if you don't approve all 3, you've got one supplier, he starts to have a problem making product, or he has a fire, or he has something that basically gives him an issue, and he says, I'd like to send you the stuff from a sister plant. And you say, well, I got to get a whole lot of stuff on you before you can do that, and I need to get it quickly because we need that ingredient next week. Then you have to understand what your challenge is if you're going to try to buy on what's called an emergency basis from a non-approved supplier. It's very important that you get this done. And then you have to do it every year. You got to get that third-party audit report every year. Not only the report, you got to get the deficiencies identified with the corrective actions and the root causes, and you have to agree that those things are going to work and control the problem. Very important if your supplier is controlling the hazard because you can't. What we're finding out is some of the industry, smaller, maybe very small, don't even know some of this stuff is coming. They're hearing about it. They're going, I don't think that's us. It is. It's everybody. It's everybody who's registered with the FDA. And in order to make a food product in the United States that's an FDA-regulated product, you have to be registered with the FDA. Now, there were some exemptions, and we don't have time to go through that, but be careful that if you say you're exempt, you are exempt. And you can prove you're exempt. And even when it's based on sales, if I went back to that slide and it's behind small, very small businesses on sales, you have to prove to the FDA those sales numbers. And they're based on the previous 3 years prior to you having to meet the preventive control for human foods. So the FDA is going to have to look at if they question you, they're going to have the right to look at your sales. And if you said, I have less than $1 million worth of sales, or whatever the number was, $2.5 million for animal feed, you're going to have to prove that. And if you basically finish up, you are 1.1 million, you didn't get that exemption. The downside is this, you may be 900,000 and you qualify the exemption and you have a very good sales and you go over 1 million, your exemption goes away. So unfortunately, your success can sometimes be, in that case, your downfall because you lose your exemption. Keep an open mind, but open mind to the point that I've got to get there, I'm going to get there, I'm going to make sure I get there, I'm going to get help to get there, I'm going to get training to get there, and we're going to do our utmost to get there, and hopefully the FDA, when we're not quite there, will be a little understanding. And they've said that on the first visit, there will be a little understanding. What they've said is they won't be understanding on the second visit if you're not there. And we don't know how much time between the first visit and the second visit there's going to be. We know that they're not going to accept a HACCP plan anymore for FDA-regulated products. And you say they're not going to accept it? No, they're going to call it a food safety plan now. And remember, there was 4 things in the food safety plan. First of all, there was a hazard analysis, which is what you have to have for a HACCP plan. And then you had to determine with those foreseeable hazards, if you remember, what is the preventive control I'm going to put in effect to control that hazard. And it could be a CCP and a HACCP program, and you can take care of it with a heat process, which is in most cases what you do. But you also, the second preventive control was allergens. And remember, the FDA has no tolerance for an allergen in a product if it's not on the label, because that's automatically a recall, and they consider that an adulterated product. And that could be the fact that it's not on the label, but it is in the product, it's supposed to be in the product, but your foreign supplier forgot to put it on the label. That's going to be a big issue for you, and you have to make sure that you know all the allergens and all those ingredients coming in, because you're going to have to take them and put them on the label, but what if the supplier leaves off an allergen and doesn't tell you that it's in there? That's why you're going to somewhat live with them to know what they're doing. Remember, your third one was the fact that you had, if you had a ready-to-eat food, you had to do an environmental monitoring. Environmental monitoring for what? Listeria monocytogenes, definitely, is what the FDA said. Salmonella and E. coli, depending on whether they would be applicable to your type of product. In your packaging rule, if you're doing a ready-to-eat product and it's exposed before you cover it. And if you ain't doing that, you better start doing that. And what is the FDA doing now? I'll give you an example. I was up in Canada just 2 weeks ago. I was at a food safety conference there in Toronto. And one of the people in the audience was talking about having just been subjected to an FDA inspection. Now this is Canada, where the FDA has said they're willing to accept the products with few questions asked because they have comparable food safety systems to us, just like New Zealand and Australia do. Doesn't mean the FDA is not coming to visit you, it just means that they're likely to come less often. But anyway, they went up there. It wasn't one person, it was 4 FDA investigators. One of them came in and all he did for 3 days, was look at records. Pull records, pull plans, pull records, pull plans, and that's all he did. He was a paperwork guy. Another person went out in the plants and went to the packaging area and just swabbed for almost 3 days, collecting several hundred swabs for Listeria monocytogenes. On the grounds of they were trying to set a baseline and see if they could find Listeria, and if they did, then they were obviously going to address it with this company on what they were going to do about it, because it would raise the question, if it's in the environment, it could be in the product. A third one walked around the plant, just looking at everybody, talking to people, interviewing employees, and seeing if they knew what they were supposed to do, understood food safety, etc., etc. And the fourth person was basically a supervisory person coordinating the efforts of the other 3. Rather a traumatic 3 days. And then when they left, they gave a debrief, and then they said, basically, we'll send you a report, and we will give you the results of the Listeria swabbing, but it may be a couple of months. They weren't there to actually do one under the Foreign Supply Verification Program because it isn't in effect yet, so they were doing a trial run, they were doing a pre-run, and they're doing that now on preventive control for human food. So even though you're not at your deadline date, the FDA can still come in just to set a baseline. And we've seen them do that over the last few years, where they've gone in and done environmental swabbing in bakeries and cookie plants and people making different types of FDA regulated products that would be more susceptible to Listeria and certainly would be ready to eat. So understand, this is what the environment's going to be starting any day now, and definitely starting after you have to be there. Remember, the new GMPs are going into effect, and they go into effect the same day as the HARP-C, the Hazard Analysis Risk-Based Preventive Controls. And make sure you're meeting the 21 CFR 117 now, not 110. The FSBP, the Voluntary Supply Verification Program, is going into effect. And in fact, the initial date is this month. And you say, well, how's that going to work? Well, everything comes in through the Customs and Border Protection. So there's paperwork on everything coming in. We've been doing that for years. What's different now is if it's a food product, it's going to have an FSBP importer on the same paperwork, and that is going to be using a DUNS number. I don't have time to get into great detail on this, but you get a DUNS number, and then that charges you with the responsibility of the safety of that food. The customs is just making sure it's a legal product coming into America, but you're going to vouch for the safety. You're the one who's going to collect the records. You're the one the FDA is coming to see. So you have to make sure that either you know you're an FSBP importer and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, or you get somebody else to do it and you get that in writing. Otherwise, it can default to you because you didn't get somebody else to do it and get them to agree to do it. Sanitary transportation of food. Remember, that's tankers, that's rail cars, that's over-the-road trailers. That's all going into effect now. And if it's a smaller trucking company, maybe a year from now. You got the produce rules. Now, you have to look at all this and go, wow, this is quite a smorgasbord here. Well, you got to pick off the smorgasbord what applies to you, but don't just leave something on the smorgasbord and go, well, that don't apply to us, and you don't really know it doesn't, and you just go, it doesn't, because the day that you find out it did and you didn't pick it up and run with it, then that's a problem. You have to also make sure that those records are available, and the FDA has the right to get them, and you have to have them available, and if they're not available, then you have to produce them in 24 hours. Now, you may get a request from the FDA where they don't even come to your plant. So let me talk about that for a minute. The FDA, for some of you, may not even want to come, but they do want to see your records. So they will send you an email, and it will basically say, we require these following records. Well, the first thing you have to do is be suspicious that it may not have come from the FDA. So the FDA tells you to call your local office and say, by the way, we just got a request this morning. It appears to come from you guys. Did you send us a request for records? And they will say yes. If they say no, somebody was fishing for your records, and please don't send them. Now you say, well, how am I going to send them? Because they're confidential. I just don't want to put them on a regular email and send them and have somebody hack into it or something. You don't send them there. They tell you where to send it, and there's a special portal with the FDA, which is supposedly secure. When I say supposedly secure, I don't know today what is secure anymore. Or you could actually just drive over there and drop them off if they're in your town or the reasonable distance. Or you could get a courier to take them over there. What I wouldn't do is just send them in the regular mail or send them as an email. I would make sure anything I'm sending to them, you have them securely sent to them. But I would verify it's them asking in the first place. You cannot deny them the records. So that's the first thing the top executive has to know. I cannot deny them the records. I cannot deny them having copies. And if you doubt that, get with your lawyers and get with everybody. And if you want to challenge it with the FDA's lawyers, I leave that up to you. But they do have the right by law. They don't have to go see a judge, which in the past they did. They don't have to do that anymore, any more than they have to go and get a judge to make you recall your product. They don't have to do that anymore. They don't have to go see a judge to close your plant anymore. Prior to January the 4th, 2011, they couldn't close your plant. They couldn't seize your product. They couldn't make you do a recall. And they couldn't look at almost any of your records. So life is changing dramatically. Now, what you want to try and do is get buy-in with all your employees, and you want to obviously make sure your employees are buying into it and hopefully get them engaged. If you're going to try and do this on your own and you're not hiring any more people into your plant, then I'm going to tell you, into your facility, you're going to get overwhelmed. You're going to get buried. You're going to drop the ball. And I say that with respect. I don't say that with disrespect. You got to drop the ball because you've got too many balls. You're juggling 20 balls. You're juggling 5 balls, and you're already juggling 5 balls with your normal job. So now you're juggling 10 balls or 25 balls. You got to drop one. You're going to have to delegate if they're not going to hire anybody. So you're going to have to delegate. So pick your loyal employees who are very good, very reliable. But again, somebody's going to have to give them time to help you. So if their boss says, well, you can have Sally, but Sally's too busy, so sorry. You go, well, that's great. Sally would help me, and Sally's good, and Sally always does a great job for me, but if Sally's not going to get time, you got to go in and see the big boss and remind him or her that their names on these food safety plans, their names on these food defense plans, their names on the sanitary transportation, their names on everything, and the FDA is going to hold them accountable if the ball gets dropped. You may be the one who dropped the ball, but you only dropped the ball because you weren't giving the thing. So I'm going to have Holly ask another question here. Where have you started your journey towards FSMA compliance?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Bob. Yep, so we'll launch the poll here and I'll speak to the options. So the question, of course, is where have you started your journey? What was your starting point? So let me launch it here. Perhaps the first step was to acquire buy-in from senior management. This is often where we see the recommendations around this. Perhaps it's to attend external training, public training classes, or to participate in training. Perhaps the first step was, I'm going to connect that gap analysis, see where the gaps are between FSMA compliance and your current system. Perhaps you just said, wow, this is a lot, we need more staff, and you boost your staff or adjusted responsibilities, or perhaps it's a mix, all of these. So we're about halfway there, I think, in terms of our responses. We'll give about 10 or 15 more seconds. What do you expect, Dr. Bob? What will not surprise you here with this response?
I would expect it to be a low percentage of people who say all of the above. I hope that the high percentage have got buy-in from senior management. I hope that they've gone back and done a gap analysis. But I imagine some of them haven't gone to external training because it's something like, well, can we go next year? Can we go later? It's not in our budget for this year. So I'll be interested in seeing where the numbers are.
Yeah, for sure. And we're just about there, so I'll close and share with everyone. So 51% said that they've attended external training. 25% said it was a mix, and then 9% acquired buy-in from senior managers, and the last one was increase their staff and responsibilities. So most have attended training, so this is good news.
So what was the buy-in from senior management? Was that 9%, did you say?
That is correct, yes.
Wow. I'm going to tell you guys and girls, you're climbing a mountain with nobody throwing you a rope. And your boss has to be at the top of the mountain throwing your rope down and hauling you up. If he ain't at the top hauling you up, you're heading to the top and you're going to fall. And it's tragic that senior management it doesn't realize what's coming. It's their business. It's their job. They're the one who's going to go to court if the FDA decides to prosecute your company because you finished up getting some people sick, and God forbid you got somebody and killed them with food. Now, I don't want to be over dramatic, but if senior management doesn't understand what's happening, this is the biggest change in the food safety regulations since 1938, which most likely none of your management were alive in 1938. And so it has been a lifetime. It's been 2 lifetimes for some people since this happened. You got to get across to them that the training is great, but without their backup when you come back, you're out there in the middle of a lake, almost like you got no oars, and the shore is getting further and further away because the tide's taking you out. So let's talk about a roadmap. That's one of the things you got to try to do with senior management is set a roadmap. You're not going to get everything done all at once. You don't have to get everything done all at once. You saw those dates. Those dates are not all at once. Some of them are all at once in the sense that some of those dates are right now. You'll have to pick where you think your biggest liability is, where you think your biggest problem is. And then you got to get time and finance and resources. Now, we only had 51%, I think it was, who went to outside training. I don't know how you can understand it. Now, please understand, the FDA does not say you have to go to preventive control of human foods. They just advise it. And they are the ones who put a grant out to develop that class. So you know everything in the class was approved by them, and it's not a class we teach that we developed. It's a class we teach that was developed on behalf of the FDA. Just the same as the one for animal food. Just the same as the one for foreign supply for verification. Those are FDA-sponsored classes, but you don't have to go to them any more than you have to go to our food defense, and that is our class, food defense, because the FDA has not put one together there. So I'm not going to tell you you got to go to those classes because that would not be true, and I'd like to be a straight shooter, and I don't want to tell you got to do something when you don't. What I would say to you is I don't know how you can get where you need to be unless you go and learn all of the things. Because if you want to read the rule, that's fine, but it's not easy to read. And it's in the case of preventive control of human food, it's about 100 pages long, and I'm not sure you can get all the nuances out of it that you need. But you've got to get there, and you've got to get a preventive approach sooner than later, because the FDA is going preventive. They're not coming in and just when you have a problem. They're still going to do that. They're still going to get involved with you if you have a recall. They're coming in to see you even if you've never had a recall. You've never had a problem. You've never been in trouble with the state. You've never been in trouble. You don't get many customer complaints. They're still coming to see you. And so what I say, the last part on this slide is don't underestimate the effort that it's going to take. It is an awful lot of effort. The big news for the big companies, they already have 20 or 30 people when you've got one. They've already got a whole lot of QA people, and they got QC people. And they got corporate people, and they got a whole lot of corporate people. They're not the ones that are going to have the issues. They already got the bases covered. I'm concerned for the medium and the very small companies because they got to get there as well. So you have to develop a strategy, and you have to be pragmatic and thorough. The stakes are high. If your boss doesn't know that, have him listen to our webinars. Now remember, this webinar is going to be recorded, so you can have your boss listen to this webinar and listen to me saying it versus you saying it. And we've got other webinars that Holly will give you access to later if you don't know where those are. And we've been doing these for about 5 or 6 years now as FSMA has gradually started to move forward. You got to understand the rules. That means your boss has got to understand the rules. Whether he or she participates in training is up to them. I tell you, if I was your boss and I was running your plant, running your distribution center, running your farm, I would be coming to training myself. I want to hear myself. Yeah, I want you to hear, and I'm going to trust you to get us where we need to be. But I need to know for myself, so when you tell me something, I know you're telling me because I got to do it, not you're telling me because you just want a wish list and you want to get everything that you ever wanted and you're going to blame it all on FSMA. You're not going to do that, but that may be some of the thoughts they got. Somebody, which may be you, is going to identify all the gaps with the suppliers, the gaps in your own program, the gaps with the transportation company, the gaps with the foreign suppliers, etc., because there can't be any gaps. And the FDA is coming in to ask you, how did you identify your gaps, and then how did you plug them? And remember, plug them can be you prevent the hazard being there, you eliminate the hazard, but you don't all have that choice, or you minimize it, and sometimes you don't have that choice. So sometimes you're back to, I got to prevent it. Well, if you don't know what a foreseeable hazard is and you don't prevent it, don't expect the FDA to be sympathetic. And remember, Bill Mahler up in Seattle, who sues everybody, he's not sympathetic either. If he gets people he's going to represent, he's coming after you for big dollars, not small dollars. The thing is, you leave this, and Hallie and I are going to finish off with a few more slides, you've got to prioritize what you're going to do. Because tomorrow if you start firing off on 6 different cylinders and like shooting a shotgun off, that's not going to be effective. But yet, you've got to hit all those targets in the end. And you're going to have to communicate and train your team or your fellow colleagues, particularly if you're going to delegate things to them, and they're going to have your back. If they don't have your back, then you're going to find out later you entrusted them to do something, and when you check on them 3 months later, 6 months later, they drop the ball. And they look at you like, okay, I dropped the ball, so what? And you go, thanks a lot, thanks a lot. Now I got to try and cover 6 months worth of stuff that I thought you were gathering. You got to validate everything. So, and the FDA has gone to the following words. You got to have a plan. You got to implement the plan. So therefore you put it in effect. But the key word they use in these days is you have to prove it's effective. Not the FDA prove it effective. You have to prove every program, plan, sanitation program, whatever it is effective. And that's where they're going to look at your records. And they're going to say it is effective because it appears it does what it's supposed to do. Or they're going to find holes in your records, or they're going to find you have too many times when it doesn't quite work, and yet you didn't come up with a good corrective action root cause. Wow, that takes a lot of time to do corrective actions and root causes. So I'm going to turn it over to Holly so she can give you a little insight into where maybe we, that means me and the rest of my colleagues, could possibly help you, or where you can go find help. Holly?
That's great. Thanks so much, Dr. Bob. Really insightful tips there. So I'll quickly speak to who SAI Global is, and then we'll dive into the questions that we've been receiving. So we came to being SAI Global in 2002, and in 2016 we were acquired by Barings Asia. The company employs more than 2,000 people across 21 countries. So real global reach. We have a number of different risk categories. So the folks on the call today are most interested in food risk, but whatever your industry, we do offer a suite of services and solutions across different areas of risk. So into enterprise risk management, EHS risk, third-party risk, compliance risk, digital or IT risk, which I think Dr. Bob you touched on as well. And with respect to food risk, again, our platforms, our solutions, and our experience offer sort of a broad variety of solutions and services. Our platforms, our software, speak to help folks with audit and supplier compliance software. The services and solutions in the auditing and certification space, variety of different products in here, as well as training, lots of different training products, and our experience, so our technical knowledge and our auditing force, our global and regional capabilities, and our subject matter experts, such as Dr. Bob, of course. On the auditing certification side, of course, we have, as a certification body, deep roots. We have lots of certified bodies with us across the globe and offer a number of different, again, services and solutions specifically in the food risk space, so auditing and certification, training solutions, supply chain management, food safety management systems, and of course, Yep, so as a CB, I'll just give you some fast facts here. We have both local and global resources with over 500 auditors in North America and over 1,600 globally. We have a number of different established relationships with global accreditation bodies. This helps us to deliver certified third-party audits. Our auditing force has deep expertise with over 10 years on the auditing experience side, as well as 13 years in industry experience. And as I mentioned, a broad range of services and solutions in this space. Our training solutions, we offer a number of different channels for training, so lots of public training or classroom, traditional classroom training. You can visit our website to view the full course offering here. We have on-site training, so all of these courses can be delivered sort of off-the-shelf on-site as well. And e-learning, we have a number of different online learning courses, and lots of free resources like today's webinar and other different pieces of content. There's a couple of course titles I just thought I'd call out here. A lot of them are aligned with the FSMA rules, but this is just sort of a sampling of what we do offer. We invite you to visit our website to learn more about this. And I will be sending some links on the follow-up email to get you this information as well. So our question and answer period here. So
before you start,
yeah,
I just want to reemphasize some of the things that you just said. We are international, so we are doing some of this training outside of the United States for your foreign suppliers. We are got auditors who can go and audit your foreign suppliers. So remember, we're more than just the Americas. We are around the rest of the world able to offer this. And I'm actually going to be doing some webinars for our sister company in England on food defense and on the foreign supplier verification program, because they've got suppliers over there who want to know from their side of the business, what do they have to do to help you, because they're getting questions from you that they're not sure what they have to do to comply. So Holly, let's do questions and answers.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Dr. Rob. First question, does any part of FSMA requirements apply to a food contact packaging manufacturer, or is it just for food?
Interesting question, because actually the preventive controls for human foods does not include food packaging, but the foreign supplier verification program does. So if you're buying your packaging from a foreign company, the answer is yes. If you're buying it from a domestic company, no.
Yep, okay, thank you. This question's from Jeff. We are a USDA inspected plant and SQF certified. Do we need to be concerned?
No, it doesn't cover anything with USDA products. But again, I would caution you that I learned something because I didn't realize the FDA does have two meat products that come under the FDA. They're venison and rabbit. And if you're making those are FDA regulated products. So in that case, meat applies. But if you're totally USDA, it does not apply to you.
Okay, thank you. This question is from John. Is the environmental monitoring, in brackets day long, done on the ready-to-eat side of the plant, or does it need to be on the raw side as well?
No, it doesn't have to be on the raw side. In fact, in a lot of cases, they would find listeria over on the raw side because it comes in with your ingredients, comes in with soil, comes in possibly with the meat. But the concern isn't there. The concern is you're doing ready-to-eat, and it better not be there now because this is a ready-to-eat product. So it's mainly being confined to the packaging room, but then you have to basically isolate that room. If not, the room becomes a bigger room because your packaging is at one end of a whole processing room, and now your whole processing room could have listeria in it.
Okay, gotcha. This question is from James. We are a co-packer who uses suppliers dictated by our customers. They approve the suppliers. Do we still need to verify and keep records on file if we get letters of assurance from our customers?
Well, somebody has to keep them. So you're right. What you need is that assurance that they're going to monitor those suppliers, that they're going to make sure they have a food safety plan, and they're going to make sure. But be sure you got those letters on file, and that takes the ball out of your court and puts it right into your co-packing court.
Yeah, fair point. This question is from William. What can a company do when they do ship full truckloads of product, but also ship partial loads on LTL? Forgive me, I don't know what that acronym means. How do you handle sanitization requirements?
Well, obviously you don't want to load your product onto a contaminated truck. So the question, let's take full load. Full load, you would obviously do an inspection, make sure the truck is clean, make sure it's in good condition, and if it needs temperature, it's got temperature controls, and they can monitor it. And then, you know, you want the cleanliness of that truck. And so if you want to know what was on that trailer before, these are part of the things you cover with the trucking company, and you get this all in writing. Now, if you do an LTL, obviously you need to establish what you don't want on that load with your own product. and you may not necessarily be the first company they come to, so we may already have product in there. You may want to be looking what's in there before you put your stuff in, even though they've agreed not to have certain stuff in there, because if you find it in there, you're most going to say, I'm not putting my product on this trailer. So you are still required to be putting it on a trailer that's in good condition and has the ability to control temperature and will not contaminate your product.
Okay. This question's from Christine. I'm a foreign supplier from Canada, and we are BRC certified. We were looking at the Voluntary Module 15, FSMA Preventive Controls Preparedness Module, and guidance for BRC. Is this a good way to implement FSMA into our facility to be audited by BRC?
Yes, it is. And let me talk to you about the Canadian thing, because I learned something on that when I was up in Canada in Toronto, because as you know, the FDA just gave Canada, along with Australia and New Zealand's had it for several years, the fact that they have somewhat of a highest approval status because they have food safety systems equal to and better than us. But I didn't realize that that doesn't give you a free pass. Apparently what you have to do is you have to be in good standing with CFIA, so make sure you are, and you have to be licensed by CFIA. For those of you who are not Canadian, license is the same thing as we're doing in America. We're registered. And not everybody in Canada has to be licensed right now. I think it goes into effect next year, but you can get licensed right now. So I would say to you, yes, do the BRC FSMA. Use that as a good guidelines. Have a good food safety plan. Make sure you're licensed with CFIA and make sure you're in good standing with CFIA. And then your customer may very well not ask to see your food safety plan, but if they do, you're going to have to share it with them.
Okay, very good. Thank you. This question is from Nancy. Is building the definitions of requirements for a preventive controls task, like label verification, in the standard operating procedure and proving the individual is trained adequate to show that the person is a qualified individual?
Well, it's a preventive control qualified individual. So remember, it's a PCQI for the Foreign Supplier Verification Program. It is a QI. And believe it or not, there are two slightly different definitions. Yeah, if you can prove that the person that you are entrusting that with has been trained, you don't have to send them to the Preventive Controls 2.5-day class. And I would not suggest you send a whole lot of people to that class. You need to send enough that they are going to have somewhat of a very involved role, but then you're going to delegate off to other people who you can qualify yourself by training. But remember, they have to basically be under your wing. You have to be the one overseeing them, and you have to be trusting them. And if they're not going to do the job real well, you need to move it to somebody else pretty quickly.
Okay, fair point. This is from Anna Marie. We produce, fresh shell eggs. Does this apply to us? We fall both under FDA and USDA. Obviously the USDA on the processing side.
Yeah, and that's one of those crossover type products. And remember, first of all, if you only had 3,000 hens, you're exempt anyway. I'm assuming you're much bigger than that. But you're right. You have to watch. Where you cross over from USDA to FDA is where you have to be in compliance with all this. If everything you do is under the USDA and it moves to the FDA with your customers, then you don't have to worry about it. Your customers do.
Yeah, okay, very good. This question is from Tony. There's two questions, actually. For environmental programs, what are the guidelines that specify not to sample in the raw area? Let me ask the second question, Dr. Bob. Maybe that'll put you better in context to answer. If you have a kill step from raw to ready to eat, do you need a physical barrier between the raw and ready to eat? Can the employee foot traffic from those two areas, can the employee foot traffic be from raw to ready to eat when the raw is packaged?
Well, the question is, if you feel that the traffic, whether it be a forklift, a pallet jack, people, a pallet, or anything, moving from the raw side to the ready-to-eat side is going to be a problem, which I do, then you don't want to move in that way, whether there's listeria on the raw side or not. The chances are there are some bacteria on the raw side. That's why you're going through a process step, usually a heat step. What the FDA is concerned about is post-heat contamination, so post-processing contamination. You have to determine that. The FDA is saying to you, the way it's going to get from one side to another is because you're not controlling. So what happens in most places, you're right, there is a clear divide between the raw side and the ready to eat. Sometimes that's a solid wall. Sometimes it's a wall with some holes in it which the product goes through, but nothing else do. Sometimes you have positive pressure on one side, the finished product side. There's many ways you can control that, but you have to control it. Otherwise, you're going to get a pathogen into your finished product, and it's going to be ready to eat, so the consumer's not going to do anything with it in the way of heat step.
Yeah, just one more follow-up question on that. Can you control it with a foot bath, like a powder?
You have to prove that, but I'm going to tell you, I don't think so. People are going to jump over it. They're going to jump around it. It's not going to have the concentration all the time. They're not going to have the contact time. If you can swab those people's feet and prove that they do get in the bath, it does work, and they don't drink it, then those are the results that you're going to look. Well, the woe betide that you're not doing that very well, and you actually finish up with listeria in your finished product, don't expect much sympathy from the FDA.
Yep, okay. A question from Christine, just to follow up for the UK Foreign Supplier webinar. Can Canadians join? Absolutely. Our webinars are conducted regionally, but are attended by very often by global attendees. So absolutely, and I'm happy to provide this to you by email. Question from Richard. If in an FDA and USDA facility, should the HACCP, I beg your pardon, and HARP-C plans be combined or kept separate in the food safety plan?
Well, I would keep them separate because, one, the USDA guy doesn't want to see your HARP-C plans. The regulators don't want to see what they don't have jurisdiction over. And one of their problems is once you show it, then they're supposed to look at it. And when they look at it, they're supposed to comment on it. So I would say you make it easier for your USDA guy if you don't show him them. That's why some companies also try and do the USDA products on one shift, get them out of the way, and then move to FDA. So they're not trying to run FDA and USDA at the same time. That's not always possible. So what you do is you try to have them in separate areas. You don't want to try to mix things together. The FDA, again, doesn't want to see your HACCP plan that meets your USDA regulations. And remember, USDA still uses the word HACCP. GFSI still uses the word HACCP. A GFSI audit is still going to look for a HACCP program. You still have to get HACCP trained. And then you, unfortunately, if the GFSI audit is good, he realizes that your HACCP plan is a process preventive control and fits at least one part of a food safety plan.
Okay, very good. 3 more questions here, Dr. Bob. I know we're a few minutes over, but we can probably wrap these up. This question's from Jeremy. If we produce not ready-to-eat products and label all products to cook to internal temperature of 165, do we need to have a preventive control for microgrowth?
Very good question. The answer is no. Once you have indicated to the consumer that they're supposed to cook it, the only problem is I'm finding out in America, USA, America, not the Americas, that the consumer is not going to do what you tell them, and then they're going to come back and sue you because they said you didn't say it clearly. So make sure you are indicating it's not a ready-to-eat product, and you are indicating it has to go to 165, and you hope that your lawyer is better than their lawyer when they finish up not cooking the product properly. But clearly by the FDA, you've done what you need to do. You've said it's not, and you've said it in writing. And if you're sending an ingredient to a customer, and it's not a retail product, you again need to say, I'm not controlling the hazard, Mr. Customer. You better control the hazard before you send it to retail because I'm not doing it. I'm sending you that in writing, and you, Mr. Customer, better respond to me in writing that you're accepting that I'm not controlling the hazard.
Okay. This question is from Kelly. If an individual is a preventive controls qualified individual for human food, can that be used for animal feed as well?
No, it's a totally separate class. And we don't teach it, so I'm not totally familiar with what's in there, but it is a totally separate class. Even the instructors have to be trained in that. They can't treat preventive control for human foods and assume that they can teach the animal food class. They can't.
Okay.
So the answer is no, there are different hazards with animal feed that are not the same ones as with human food.
Okay.
Well, allergens is one. We have no reason to believe that animals are allergic to allergens. That type of thing.
Does the preventive controls qualified individual replace the HACCP certification?
For the FDA, yes, but not for GFSI and not for, therefore, for USDA. So the answer is no, it doesn't if you are having to have your GFSI orders to come in, because GFSI, all those schemes say you have to be HACCP trained, and therefore you have to have gone to a HACCP class, not a preventive controls for human food or animal food class.
Yeah, okay. Last question here for today, and then we'll close it. So this is from Robert. If your GFSI certification, will GFSI certification be sufficient for the time being, and then adding gap elements to the various areas? So he's named fresh breads and frozen breads. This is for a producer in Canada.
Well, no, GFSI will not be accepted for now if your date is passed. So if you say for now because our date's not here, that's between you and your customer. And so, yes, I would say you could still keep sending your product into America because the Foreign Supplier Verification Program deadline for you has not come and your customer is willing to accept it. But now if your customer says, I don't care that your date is in 2018, I want you to be there now, then your customer is driving you to get there now, not the FDA.
Okay. All right, very good. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for your questions. Dr. Bob, thank you very much for your presentation today. A reminder, folks, that we've recorded the webinar. You'll get a link to the slide deck as well as the recording within 2 business days. And with that, we'll bid you a wonderful day, and we'll look forward to catching you in the next webinar. Thanks, Dr. Bob.
Thank you. Bye.